Om Jnana-timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadama Hyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tushe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, Hare Krishna everyone. As I mentioned at the beginning, again, we're having a smaller batch than normal. As I said, different people this week than last week, so people are still attending consistently. So don't think that's a reason not to attend. It's just we're having an alternating set of people who can't make it on each specific week. So, oh, someone in the waiting room. So yeah, okay. We will begin then. I will share my screen. Let me know if you can see it. Okay, actually, I may as well start from around here. Slideshow. Okay, so we are resuming our discussion of chapter 10 of the Bhagavad-gītā. Chapter 10, as we've already discussed, I won't do much revision, but just to refresh our memories, chapter 10 is a continuation of the most confidential knowledge, right, of the king of knowledge, right? It's a continuation of that in Krishna. He says very clearly, Bhuya, I am reiterating this knowledge for you, Arjuna. And we discussed a few ways in which this can be considered a reiteration. We considered a few reasons why Krishna might do this. Fundamentally, it's because Krishna is trying to stress this point and make it clear, because Krishna is a very indirect speaker, right? Krishna often speaks indirectly, but when he's speaking about something so important, he wishes to stress it ultimately. Then we discussed the unknowability of Krishna, and we discussed the different ways which knowledge can be attained, and how they explain how Krishna is unknowable. If anything, the beginning part of chapter 10 tells us that Krishna is radically unlike what we can understand. Again, we used the example of saying that Paramatma, Brahman, we can infer their existence. If you locked a very intelligent person in a room for long enough, they would probably come to understand that the Brahman effulgence exists, right? They would maybe be able to understand that Paramatma exists, right? You lock them into a room, they'll figure it out at one point, but they'll never be able to understand or conceptualize the little blue boy with the flute, right? They will not be able to conceptualize Bhagavan. So like this, we were stressing, that we can know some things about Krishna, but especially him in his most intimate position, we cannot speculate, we cannot infer it, we cannot logically argue it, right? When we study Nectar of Devotion, however, we will discuss all the reasons why, even though we can't reach that conclusion on our own, Krishna still is the absolute form, logically and rationally. Okay, so then we kept on going. Krishna was stressing this point. Again, we did all of this last week, so I won't go into so much detail. And then finally, I thought we concluded with this wonderful text from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, right? Which is talking about how Krishna, he tries to hide himself in various ways, right? And this comes to the point that we made at the beginning, right? Why is Krishna reiterating this knowledge? Why is Krishna, again, bhuya, again speaking this knowledge? Why? Because he likes to speak indirectly. He likes to speak. He likes to speak in, maybe we can say, in his own way, in an indirect manner, right? And so he tries to hide himself, right? And we see this all the time. Krishna trying to hide himself is actually something that I think we'll find stressed throughout the rest, the second half of this chapter, which is to say that Krishna, by reciprocating naturally with everyone, he'll keep himself at a certain distance. If somebody wishes to have material pleasures, then Krishna will keep that sort of distance and he'll hide himself away, right? We can think of it naturally like any other person. If somebody's just there and they just want to know you because of what they can get from you, if they just want to know you because of how you can help them with their career, how you can give them some money, right? Then you'll keep a certain distance, right? If, on the other hand, somebody will know you just because they know they'll get a healthy friendship from you, even then, right? They know they get good emotional support from you. Even then, we might be closer to that person than we would be for the person who uses us for their career or for money, but we still wouldn't be very close, right? We would think, oh, this person, they hang around me because they get some sort of emotional support. And that's like the people who worship Krishna for liberation, right? Krishna thinks, okay, they're getting something from me still. They're a little bit better than the materialist, right? So I'll give some more of myself to them, but I won't give myself in fullness, right? But then the person who loves someone because they're captured by them, right? The person who loves someone because they're completely absorbed in their beauty, right? The person who loves someone, right? And who wishes to be with them simply because they cherish that person. That is a person that we will be very intimate with. And it is much the same with Krishna, right? Therefore, the pure devotees know Krishna as he is. Okay, so then continuing on, then we came on to the Chaturshloki. And the Chaturshloki is a discussion then, which is talking about this knowing of Krishna, right? We now know that Krishna is unknowable, but how then in turn is he knowable? Because some people do know about him, right? Some people do say things about him. Some people do have some understanding about Krishna. So how can this be done? And so in order to discuss all this, we will begin our discussion of the Chaturshloki, which hopefully we will be able to conclude today. Okay. So to begin with, I know I already did this last week, but I'm going to do it again just because these shlokas are very important. Maybe we can have Sri Mataji can say the Sanskrit if she's feeling up for it. I normally don't ask people to do the Sanskrit, but Sri Mataji can say the Sanskrit for this shloka, and maybe we can have Mrunal Mataji can say the English.
Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam pura bhava samanvitaha.
From the source of all spiritual and material worlds, everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So very nicely this has been shared, right? And this is of course a very, very famous text, right? As I said last week, especially for those of us who've grown up in ISKCON, this is something that's seared into the back of your mind, right? You'll forget your own name before you forget the shloka, right? So, and it's very famous for a reason. It very much conceptualizes Krishna's relationship with everything. Krishna is the source of all spiritual and material worlds, and everything emanates from him, right? The wise who perfectly know this engage in his devotional service and worship him with all their hearts. This is the essence of everything we've discussed, right? This is the essence of all of what we've discussed, right? Krishna is the linchpin of reality. Krishna is not one person among many, but is instead the person from which all other persons originate from, right? Krishna is all of these grand things, and yet how do we understand these grand things? We understand it by engaging in devotional service and worshiping Krishna with all of our hearts, right? Again, some people might say, oh, you Gauryas, right? You're trying to read the yoga ladder into the text, right? You Gauriya Vaishnavas, you are very attracted to bhakti yoga. So therefore you are saying bhakti is supreme. Therefore you are saying bhakti is the topmost yoga process, right? Already, I think in the first 6 chapters, we demonstrated that it's just Krishna who's saying that. It's not us. We're simply repeating Krishna's message. But here again, we find it, right? Krishna had said, I'm telling you the most confidential thing. And now he's saying, I'm saying it again so that it can be clear for you. And how is he making it clear? He's saying, Matva bhajante mam, worship me, right? Worship me completely absorbed in me. This is the conclusion, right? So don't let anyone say, oh, you Gauriya is just like bhakti, right? One day you'll be able to meditate on your breath like me. But for now, you can concentrate on Krishna. Once you concentrate on Krishna enough, then you'll be able to do breath meditation like I do. Don't let anyone say that, right? Because it is Krishna who disagrees. This is not a sectarian thing. It's simply just saying, please stop twisting around with Krishna's words. In fact, there's one famous commentator, and his Gita is very, very popular. You'll see many people on the streets. Many people on the streets aren't reading the Gita, but if they have read the Gita, the odds are this is likely to be the edition. And whenever Krishna says something like this, he says, oh, Krishna, he is not speaking. He's not speaking about himself. Rather, he's speaking about the divinity within himself. This is what they'll say, right? So Krishna, he's speaking about the divine within himself. But this is an issue, right? Can anyone remember? Prabhupada addresses this in the 2nd chapter. I'm throwing in a little bit of revision things because we've gone in so deep into the Bhagavad-gītā. Can anyone remember in the 2nd chapter, Prabhupada says there's a big issue with this train of thought? Can anyone think, what is the issue of saying that Krishna is referring to the divinity within him, right? To the eternal, impersonal Brahman within him, and not instead to Krishna himself? So we hear in the Bhagavad-gītā, but we also hear in Srimad Bhagavatam, na chantarana bahir yasya, right? Krishna, he has no inside or outside. There is nothing inside Krishna. There is nothing outside Krishna. This is the transcendental position of Krishna, and this is the very confusing nature. He has form, but it is eternal form. He has form, but it is an absolute form. That is why Krishna, with his eyes, can eat, right? And with his fingers can sing, and with his mouth can walk, right? There is no distinction between Krishna's form and himself, and there is no distinction between parts of Krishna's form and other parts of Krishna's form. In fact, we cannot say there is a part of Krishna's form. If you have one part of Krishna's form, you have all of Krishna's form. Krishna is absolute. There is no inside and outside. So this whole logic makes no sense, right? So anyways, going back to the Chaturshloki, we should understand this, right? Bhakti is the essence of the Gita, and this is a very clear reading of the text, right? Anyone who says otherwise have come with their own conclusion and are trying to read it into the text. And so Krishna, he is saying, I'm the source of all material, all spiritual and material worlds. In fact, aham sarvasya prabhavo can mean quite literally anything, right? Of course, we traditionally render it as the source of all realities, but everything is coming from Krishna. Some of our acharyas render this as saying that Krishna, he is the source of all other avatars, right? Krishna is actually not an avatar in one sense. Sometimes our acharyas will say this. What is Krishna? He is not an avatar. He is does anyone know? What is the word for the source of all the avatars?
Avatari.
Avatari, correct. Very good. We have many Sanskrit scholars in this class. So avatari, right? Krishna, he is the avatari, and all the avataras, right? If we want to use Sanskrit rather than Hindi pronunciation, right? All of the avataras, they are coming from the avatari, right? So Krishna, he is aham sarvasya prabhavo, right? This is what we hear in Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishnastu Bhagavan Svayam, right? This is a very famous text, and it said after in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a listing of all the different incarnations of the Lord. And then right at the end, we hear, but tu, Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam, but Krishna, he is the original personality of Godhead, right? And so aham sarvasya prabhavo, right? Matta sarvam pravartate, everything emanates from me, right? And of course, we understand this as all reality is coming from Krishna, right? Everything is coming forth from him, but not just all of reality, but also our entire spiritual life is coming from him, right? All of our knowledge is coming from him. This is another subliminal message. When we speak about knowing Krishna, we cannot know him, right? But we can know him because matta sarvam pravartate, right? All of this knowledge, all of the tools by which we use to come to know him, they all emanate from Krishna. So yes, all the material and spiritual worlds emanate from Krishna, but so too does all the energy of bhakti. So too does the spiritual master, right? The guru, acharya mam vijaniyat, right? The acharya, he is to be considered as Krishna himself, right? Because Krishna is emanating out the spiritual master. And therefore, right, iti in Sanskrit can mean therefore. It can also mean there's a quote, right? Thus, right? So thus, people who understand this perfectly, they engage in my devotional service and they worship me with all their hearts. Now, I want to bring up a point quickly. And this point has to do with the nature of this bhakti, because what have I been stressing, right? I've been stressing that this is the least confidential knowledge? No, this is the most confidential knowledge, right? And I've been saying that so many times. I hope it hasn't become like the yoga ladder where I've beat you all over the head with it, right? But I want to stress one final point maybe before I'll set that concept aside, right? And that is at the most confidential level. What is the most confidential level of bhakti, right? We've discussed this a little bit before, and there's a few ways you can answer it. So if I say your answer is wrong, it's not wrong, it's just not the one I'm thinking about. What is the most confidential form of bhakti? What is the highest form of bhakti? When we get to Nectar of Devotion, we'll discuss this infinitely more, but we've discussed it a tiny bit, yes?
Krishna Prema?
Yes, Krishna Prema, but within Krishna Prema, there are different levels. What is the most esoteric form of Krishna Prema? Krishna Prema, love for Krishna, as they say at Mangal Aarti. So we can think there are two main moods, right? There is Aishwarya, and there is, who can tell me, what is the second one? Aishwarya and
Is it Madhurya?
yes, Madhurya. Tanya Mataji has helped us out. So there's Aishwarya and there's Madhurya, right? Aishwarya is opulence and Madhurya is sweetness, right? Which one is higher, Aishwarya or Madhurya?
Madhurya Prabhu.
Madhurya.
Madhurya, right? And why is Madhurya higher and more esoteric? So the reason why Madhurya is more esoteric, right, is for what I mentioned earlier on. When we love someone because of their position, when we love somebody because of this, because of that, right? We love them, yes, but I often think about it. You'll see like the average a pop star looks like, if you actually think about it, they just look like an average human being. But because they're famous, because there's all of this Aishwarya to them, suddenly they're the most beautiful person, right? We'll think of it with so many. You'll see people will say the most beautiful, the most attractive men in the world, the most beautiful women in the world, and there'll always be these celebrities, right? Because there's this Aishwarya related to them. People, they think, wow, right? Often I think if you saw this person and they weren't a famous singer, if they weren't an actor or an actress, you wouldn't care, right? Maybe somebody might think, oh, they're an all right looking person, right? But they're not like, and then they would say some other singer or some other actor, right? Because there's that Aishwarya there. There isn't an attraction for the actual person. There's an attraction for the person and all of the opulence they represent. Oh, wow, they're rich. Oh, wow, they're famous. Oh, wow, they're powerful, right? And so this isn't a very intimate love. It is a love, but it is a love grounded in something else, right? Madhurya, on the other hand, is love in sweetness, right? This is the love in Goloka, right? This is the love where Mother Jashoda, she thinks, oh, Krishna, he is hungry. My little boy, he's hungry. And if I do not feed him, then he will die. He will starve to death. This is the Madhurya mood. There is no conceptualization, oh, Krishna is God, therefore I must worship him. Krishna is the Supreme Personality, therefore I must worship him, right? Sudama, Krishna's friend, right? He will run around and he'll tease Krishna and he'll say, oh, Krishna wishes he was a Brahmin like me, right? He'll say like this. He's not thinking, oh, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so I must worship him like this, right? So Madhurya is much sweeter and it is much more intimate, and it is situated not with a lack of Aishvarya, but rather the Aishvarya is like medicine, right? And Madhurya is like sugar. When I was very little, I wouldn't like the taste of medicines, right? And so my parents, they would do, well, I'm sure lots of parents do, they would put medicine in the sugar, and then I would eat the sugar, and very happily, I would eat the very, very sweet sugar, and I wouldn't even realize that I've also eaten the medicine, right? It's the same with Aishvarya and Madhurya. In Goloka, there is full Aishvarya, there is full opulence, but the Madhurya, the sweetness, is so strong that that knowledge of Krishna's godhood is completely forgotten as they intimately engage in those loving exchanges. So in this way, we see Madhurya is sweeter than Aishvarya, right? Madhurya is higher than Aishvarya. Madhurya is a more esoteric knowledge than Aishvarya, Gyan, right? So far, so good. We're all tracking. So then we might wonder, right? What is this text talking about, right? Because this text, what would we say? Is this text a text filled with Aishvarya, or is this a text filled with Madhurya? What would we say?
Madhurya?
Madhurya? Would you say, because Madhurya, we're talking about sweetness, right? So Madhurya is when Krishna is lifting Mount Govardhan, right? Aishvarya is thinking, look at the opulence of the Lord. He is able to carry Giriraj Govardhan, right? With just one pinky, right? He's able to carry it. That is Aishvarya Gyan. Madhurya Gyan is Krishna is only able to carry it because the rest of us are helping him, right?
This one Aishwarya Prabhu, I think.
Aishvarya, right? So there's both. Vishaka Mataji was not wrong. There is Madhurya here, hidden away, a little bit secret. But on the surface reading, there's a lot of Aishvarya here, right? A lot of Aishvarya. Look at the, sorry?
Oh, sorry. Do these go hand in hand? So would you have Aishwarya and Madhurya together, and then one would just be greater than the other?
So one tends to eat the other, right? Either there is no Madhurya, and therefore you have the Aishvarya Gyan, and there you have Narayan, king of the cosmos, right? You have this Aishvarya mood. But if there's Madhurya, then a tiny bit of Madhurya is normally there for Ram Bhakts, right? So Ram Bhakts, they see Ramchandra and they see, oh wow, he is the Supreme Lord, but look, he's human-like and he's showing these nice qualities. I love Ramchandra so much, right? This is the Ram Bhakta. And then you have Krishna Bhakts in other sampradayas. The two sampradayas that really propound intimacy are Vishnu Swami, I'm trying to remember, Vallabhacharya, Pushti Marg, right? Is the Pushti Marg line and the Gauriya line. Then you have other lines and they will think, wow, Krishna, he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he's ruling in Dwarka with his wives and he's living such a wonderful life, right? There you have them both hand in hand, right? But then eventually you have the conception in Goloka, right? And then you have, oh, is Krishna God? Maybe he's not God. Who cares for the existence of God? Here is Krishna before me, right? Who is God? God is the person we pray to in order to take care of Krishna, right? That he protects Krishna. That is, so sometimes they go hand in hand, but in the highest form, the Aishwarya is completely consumed by the Madhurya. Yeah, that's why we were talking about Ishtadevs, right? You might recall we were talking about Ishtadevs maybe a fortnight ago. Does anyone know who the Ishtadev of Srimati Radharani is?
Was it Suryadev?
Yes, it's Suryadev, right? It's not Krishna, right? It's Suryadev. Of course, in actuality, it very much is Krishna, right? But in the pastime, in the sweetness, she's not thinking, I go to Krishna to worship him. Krishna is her paramour boyfriend, right? And not God or anything crazy like that, right? Surya is who she prays to. Okay, so that is at the higher points, right? Nanda Maharaj is an Nrsingadev devotee to my knowledge. Oh no, I'd have to double check now the specific form for Nanda Maharaj, but still the point stands, right? So at the highest level. So this is not on the surface filled with Madhurya. And yet we may wonder if this is the most confidential knowledge. And today we'll be going into a bit of esoteric philosophy. So hold on to your horses, okay? So we might wonder if this is the most esoteric knowledge, why is he discussing Aishvarya Gyan, right? Why is he discussing this knowledge? So we'll discuss it a little bit, and this will come up with some discussion of Jagannath, because I think Jagannath most perfectly embodies this relationship between Aishvarya Gyan and Madhurya Gyan, especially for us as bhaktas. We'll come back later on in the final text, also is very much Jagannath related, in my humble opinion. So this text, so Aishvarya Gyan is there, right? But Aishvarya Gyan is somehow needed in order for us to go into Madhurya Gyan, right? Aishvarya Gyan, to answer Vishaka Mataji's question actually, Aishvarya Gyan and Madhurya Gyan, they have interesting relationships, the sweetness and the opulence of the Lord. They interact in dynamic ways. We have first that initial system I was explaining. You have a bit of Aishvarya, and then Madhurya comes, and then the Madhurya comes and it conquers it, right? And we see this really wonderfully acted out in Krishna's pastimes, in the Kaliya Daman Leela, right? We all know Krishna, he is dancing on Kaliya's heads, right? Sometimes Kaliya gets listed as one of the demons that Krishna kills, but this is not correct. Krishna never kills Kaliya, right? And actually, we hear Krishna never kills anyone. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, it said whenever Krishna kills a demon, it's actually Narayan within him who does the killing. Krishna is not concerned with killing. Krishna is concerned with dancing and with playing, right? But so normally all of these demons, when Krishna goes to kill them, the actual punch is not landed by Krishna. It's landed by Narayan, right? But does Krishna punch Kaliya? No, he dances on his heads, right? So Kaliya, he's in a very, very special category. Kaliya, we should not consider him to be in the position of the other demons that went to kill Krishna, right? Kaliya, he received a very special mercy. He directly had Krishna touching him the whole time, right? Krishna directly was dancing on his head. So Narayan does not dance. Vishnu does not dance, but Krishna, he dances. And so the dancing on his head is very specifically only Krishna, right? And therefore Kaliya, at the end, what happens, right? Actually, once I was hearing Katha from a very elevated Vaishnava, and he was explaining that when Krishna would dance on Kaliya's heads, right, the whole cosmos engaged, right? Indra came with his mridanga, and Indra began to play the mridanga. Narad Muni came with his veena, and they were all playing music to Krishna. Krishna's dancing. And at one point, the dancing became so wonderful, right? Became so rhythmic, became so intoxicating that even Kaliya, he would move his head. You know, when you bop your heads in rhythm with music, Kaliya would start bopping his head, right? In the rhythm to the music that was playing. So wonderfully like this, Krishna, he is dancing on Kaliya's heads, right? And then what happens at the end? With blood pouring out of his mouth, Kaliya, he becomes a wonderful devotee, right? And so we can speak a long time about this. My spiritual master, I think his katha on this pastime is like 14 hours long in total. So I won't repeat all of it back to you, but even beyond that, the acharyas, they've written really fascinating commentaries on this pastime. But one specific point that I want to bring up, right? One specific point that I want to bring up is the relationship of Aishvarya and Madhurya Gyan in all of the devotees who are watching Krishna, right? This pastime, Kaliya Daman Leela, is very unique. It and Govardhan Leela are very related by one central similarity they have. Does anyone know what connects Govardhan Leela to Kaliya Daman Leela? Can we think? Just think, if you just think about the pastime, just think about it. Just
I think, again, I think you already said that they were directly in contact with Krishna. One Krishna himself kind of lifted Govardhana, and then the Kaliya, he gave the footprints on,
yeah,
on his
you,
head.
you definitely have that. But then you can also say, well, Govardhan is Krishna himself, right? So I'm assuming Krishna has a lot of contact with himself. So that is a good point, right? But that's not the specific one I'm looking for. It's correct though, right? It's getting there. Actually, it's close enough, even though you'll think it was not close enough, but it seems close enough in my head too. As you're saying, directly Krishna, right? Directly Krishna, everyone in Vrindavan, all the Brijvasis are directly seeing Krishna, right? In Kaliya Daman Lila, all of the devotees, they all run to see, oh, Krishna, he's getting killed by this serpent, right? And in Govardhan Lila, well, they don't really have any other option. They're going to have to be with Krishna, right? If they want to survive the flooding, and very happily they're with him. So these two pastimes are the only ones where we see all of the devotees, they arrive. And so very sweetly, both of these pastimes act out the different varieties of devotees. We see all of the rasas in Govardhan pastimes. We see when Krishna, he is holding up Giriraj Govardhan. I've already made mention of it, right? The cowherd men, they're taking their sticks and they're using it to hold up Govardhan, right? That is their rasa with Krishna, right? The cowherd boys, they're teasing Krishna, right? They're saying, oh, Krishna, Krishna, you're so weak, you're struggling to hold it up, right? Ha ha ha, they're teasing Krishna, right? They're saying, Krishna, if you ever need a break, we can lift it for you. We know you're a little bit weak. We know we're all stronger than you, right? Mother Jashoda, she's weeping. She's weeping. She's saying, look at the tiny drop of sweat on Krishna's forehead, right? Look at that drop of sweat. Look how much he is struggling. It's breaking my heart. Bhakti Vikash Maharaj, he quotes Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. He says, Mother Jashoda, she would die a million deaths in order to wipe just one drop of sweat off Krishna's forehead, right? So like this, we see all the rasas, right? The gopis, they're there, and Krishna, he's saying this is the only opportunity for them to look at each other, right? Because otherwise they're not allowed to by societal norms. But Krishna in that moment, that's why it said, why does Krishna lift Govardhan with his left hand? We can think Radha Gopinath, right, of our deities. On which side is Srimati Radharani of Krishna? She is on the left side, right? So Krishna, he lifts Giriraj Govardhan with his left hand because that is where all his Shakti is. Srimati Radharani is his Shakti, and therefore with his left hand, he is lifting up Govardhan, right? But then why does he use his pinky, right? Because if he's using his left hand to lift up Govardhan, that is where Srimati Radharani is, on his left hand. So in order to be able to see her, he uses the smallest finger, right? So he can see past that finger in order to have some darshan, right? So like this, we're seeing all of the different rasas are there. In a different way, we find a similar relationship between Krishna and the Brijvasis in Vrindavan, in Kaliya Daman Lila. Because what happens? We might know Krishna, he dives into the water, right? He ties up his dhoti, and it's described by acharyas, almost like an action star, right? He dives into the water in order to fight Kaliya. But when Krishna comes back out of the water, what happens? Is he doing very well? No, he's being strangled by Kaliya, right? Kaliya's coils are fully wrapped around him, right? And seeing this, all of Vrindavan, they become very, very, very disturbed, right? Very disturbed. And what happens? There are two camps, it's described in Shastra, that are watching Krishna. One camp, what do they say? They say, Krishna, he is dying. Krishna, he will die. And they are trying to dive into the water, right? They're trying to dive in. They're trying to immerse themselves. They're trying to fight Kaliya, right? So this is the one half. But the other half, they're saying, no, it's Krishna. It's all right. You know Krishna. Krishna survives all of these things. And what are they doing? They're holding them back. They're preventing them from diving into the water. Here we find the Aishwarya mood, and we find the Madhurya mood. The Madhurya mood is saying, let me dive into the water. And the Aishwarya mood is saying, no, it's Krishna. He'll be fine, right? These are the two moods there. And what do we see? What does Aishwarya do then? Aishwarya holds Madhurya back, quite literally in this pastime, but it's acting it out. It's acting out the principle for us to see this. Those who are having some Aishwarya conception, they are holding back those with the Madhurya conception. Ultimately, We must lose all sense of the Aishvarya conception in order to dive deep into the Madhurya conception. Okay, so you might be saying, well, Prabhu, that doesn't address anything about why Krishna is speaking such an Aishvarya conception in this height of the Gita, right? But we can also think of two other things, right? And this will answer our question, and it'll also begin to relate to Jagannath, right? And firstly, that is, we must understand Aishvarya before we can understand Madhurya, right? Before we can deeply establish intimate bhakti with Krishna, we should establish general bhakti with Krishna. And in order to do that, we should have some knowledge. It is not that the gopis and Mother Yashoda do not have that knowledge in their head. But in the same way that if someone is a mother and their child becomes a prime minister, even if they know their child is a prime minister, they will never look at their child and say, oh, here is the Prime Minister of Australia, right? They will still go and they will still look at their child and they'll see, here is my son, here is my daughter, right? Maybe that knowledge of the prime ministership is somewhere in their mind, but it's never really tapped into, right? So that knowledge, it's there, right? The knowledge is there, and that knowledge needs to be there, right? Sometimes we refer to Krishna, especially when we are referring to him in terms of this conception, we'll refer to him as the ground of being, right? This is a Western phrase, but I've seen it's creeped into devotee conversations, and I think very nicely. I think it's a very valuable phrase. It comes from Paul Tillich, who we don't need to get into his theology, but he was a very, very influential and profound thinker. But the ground of being, right? Krishna is the ground of being, right? And that's what it means. And it means quite literally what it means. What does it mean to be the ground of being? It means that you're the source of all reality. Everything that exists, you are the ground of it, right? You are the origin. The ground is what we stand on. Krishna is the ground of being, the ground of existence itself, right? So we need to understand that Krishna is the ground of being before we can dance, right? This is what bhakti is. Bhakti is dancing on the ground of being. And so Madhurya is beginning to dance, right? It's beginning to intimately dance. But first we have to ground ourselves, right? We have to situate ourselves appropriately into who Krishna is before we can start forgetting who he is, right? So there is that aspect, right? But then you might say, oh, well, this is still saying something. This is still saying something that is not the most confidential knowledge. This is still saying that something that is not the most esoteric knowledge, right? That point makes sense, but you're saying it's a preliminary point, and that's true, right? And so we can go to something a little bit deeper, because we might say, well, Krishna, he is implicitly referring to these higher things, but he is explicitly saying these lower things so that people won't be caught up in stuff that they are not qualified to yet learn, right? And this is true. As we go deeper into the Chaturshloki, we will see implicitly that there is all of the higher things mentioned, right? But there is also the highest thing mentioned here. And this is where we come to Jagannath, right? I won't discuss this for in depth, because you can discuss this in a lot of depth. I've given long classes back when I went through Chaitanya Charitamrita. We did very, very long class. We did quite a few sessions on this topic of Jagannath embodying Aishvarya. But basically, when Mahaprabhu, he is dancing in front of Jagannath, right? What is happening? When Mahaprabhu dances in front of Jagannath, he refers to Jagannath as Prabhu, as Lord, right? That's a very Aishvarya conception. The name Jagannath itself, it's not a very sweet Madhurya Rasik name, right? It's not a very intimate name, right? What does Jagannath mean? It means Lord of the universe. That is very, very Aishvarya Gyan, right? Very much the Aishvarya mood, right? So Jagannath is like this. And Sri Kshetra, right? Sri is very opulent, right? So here we're finding lots and lots of opulence, right? It's sometimes described that Vrindavan is in the mood of Madhurya, in the mood of sweetness. Navadvip Mayapur is in the mood of Audarya, mercy. And Jagannath Puri is in the mood of Aishvarya, in the mood of opulence, right? So now we might wonder many things, because Mahaprabhu, what is Mahaprabhu doing? Mahaprabhu, he is immersing himself in Madhurya, in intimate moods. So what is he doing? Dancing in front of Jagannath, right? And dancing in front of somebody who is apparently very much in an Aishvarya mood, right? Dancing in front of him dancing in a dham, which is embodying Aishwarya. Why is he doing all of these things, right? Again, it's a very, very long discussion, lots of pastimes, lots of philosophy. Tarun Prabhu, I see you have a question.
Yes, Prabhu. Prabhu, my knowledge, maybe big gaps come out here. Prabhu, my understanding is that Jagannath, the very form is that he listens about Radha and he get completely absorbed and all that, and his eyes wide and he gets that form. It's nothing Aishwarya. So how is he got named Jagannath, which is fully Aishwarya, while he got the form, which is completely like he get absorbed to the point where he gets that shape?
Yes, so that's a very good question, and that's exactly the point that I want to get to now. Why is Mahaprabhu dancing in front of him? Because as you've said very nicely, Jagannath form is manifested because of so much sweetness, right? So much relishing this Madhurya mood, the pastimes of Srimati Radharani, and so this form manifests, right? So we might wonder then, well, now what do we do, right? Mahaprabhu, right? Mahaprabhu, he is dancing in front of Jagannath, but yet Jagannath, he is having this name. And Jagannath, he is in Jagannath Puri Dham, right? Aishwarya Dham. What is going on here, right? So this is a good question to have, and that is a question that I'm hoping you all would have as you are studying the pastimes of Mahaprabhu, right? So then how do we understand it? We might recall, when is Krishna hearing these pastimes? When is Krishna hearing them? The pastimes of Srimati Radharani. He's hearing them when he is in Dwarka, right? Krishna, he is not hearing these pastimes when he is in Vrindavan. He is hearing them in Dwarka. You might remember, I just said it like 10 minutes ago in response to Vishaka Mataji's question, right? Dwarka has a lot of Aishwarya in it, right? There is a presence of Aishwarya there. So Krishna, he's hearing these pastimes, but he's hearing them in separation from Srimati Radharani, right? And he's hearing them in separation, and therefore he manifests this form. Jagannath Puri is not just Aishwarya Dham, but it is also Vipralambha Dham. It is the Dham of separation. Jagannath Puri is sometimes described as Gupta Vrindavan, the hidden Vrindavan, the Vrindavan which is hidden away, right? It is non-different to Vrindavan. But what is the difference then in that non-difference? In Vrindavan, Krishna, he is having union with his devotees. He is seeing Srimati Radharani. In Jagannath Puri, he is feeling separation from his devotees. It is Vipralambha Kshetra. It is a dham of separation. And so Jagannath, he is the deity of separation. He is love in separation, not love in union. This is the glory of Jagannath, right? So what does this have to do with Aishwarya, Madhurya, everything else, right? Why are we talking about Jagannath? This is how we can understand. He is having this Aishwarya name because this Aishwarya is separating him from Srimati Radharani. And so this Aishwarya Gyan is one which is separating him. And so in that, this is a very specific form of Aishwarya. This is a higher form of Aishwarya. This is the highest experience of Aishwarya. For those devotees at the highest level, Aishwarya Gyan does not lower their bhakti, it increases it. Right? Because when I mentioned in Kaliya's pastimes, do you think those devotees who were being held back by the other devotees, do you think that they were suddenly loving Krishna less? Do you think their desire to see Krishna, to serve Krishna, was decreased because they were held back? When you are held back, it increases. It becomes stronger. And so this is the role at the highest levels. When devotees encounter Aishwarya, they don't experience it to lower their bhakti like it does for those of us who are slowly going through Krishna consciousness. When one is at a perfected form of Krishna prem, in intimacy, in Madhurya, Aishwarya exists to contrast and to make one's intimate love deeper. When the gopis see Krishna in Dwarka, at Kurukshetra, and that's why we're coming full circle. That's why I'm not saying this is a stretch at all. Krishna, he's being reminded, right, of Kurukshetra when he saw all the gopis, right? And when he saw all of them, what did they say? Did they say, wow, we've finally seen Krishna again. Krishna, he left Vrindavan, and now we've seen Krishna again. We are so satisfied. We are so happy. Is this what the gopis say? No. They say, where is the Krishna we knew? His peacock feather is gone. Now he's wearing a crown, right? Why is he has a sword near him? Where is his flute, right? Why is he wearing armor? He should be wearing a dhoti. Why is he here in this wonderful king's chariot? He should be riding a bullock's cart, right? Where is our Krishna, right? So like this, what happens? Their meditation on Krishna deepens. Their love for Krishna deepens when they meet Aishwarya. So when we discuss Aishwarya, it is not always a secondary thing. Sometimes at the very highest level, it can also be part of the highest thing, because that Aishwarya can create that separation. And in that separation, love grows deeper, not stronger. It's a bit of a rasic book, so when I quote it, I'm not recommending for you to study it, but there's a wonderful description in Prema Samputa by Chakravarti Thakur, and he says that a lamp glows brighter in the dark than it does in the day. So too it is the same with the love, the intimate love of the devotees. When they are in separation, the lamp of love grows brighter than when they are in the presence of Krishna himself. So in this sense, Aishwarya is also relevant. So as I said, this is a bit more esoteric, a bit more on the intense side of things. This is a bit more of the rasic element of our philosophy, but I do think we should hear it when we're discussing the most esoteric knowledge. Normally I wouldn't discuss so many intimate topics, but these are very important. I think every once in a while we should hear these things. We should have some understanding of these more higher topics. And when is there a more appropriate time? Then again, the most confidential knowledge. Okay. Does that make sense? Are there any questions? Has anyone been lost in what I was saying? So in this way, we can understand. Aishwarya has a place in the most confidential knowledge, right? In a few multiple ways. Firstly, for us, we should understand this knowledge before we enter into more intimate things, right? Of the rag mark, right? Secondly, it's also that this knowledge is how do I put it? It's also that this knowledge is present, right? One needs it, right? But lastly, it's also because that Aishwarya at the highest level also intensifies that love. So we shouldn't think that it's totally removed. There's a very intimate role for it. Okay. That's I do have to leave early, and I do want to get through the Chatur Shloki today. Let's finish our 1 hour discussion of the first shloka and hopefully do a slightly shorter discussion of the second one.
Prabhu, we are happy to listen more of this. Let the Chatur Shloki can go.
Okay. Yeah, I think people enjoy Rasikatha. We're all Sahajiyas deep down, aren't we? Okay. Let's keep on going there. Next text. Okay, now maybe we can have Katyayani Mataji. Is Srinivas Prabhu absent today?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, he is unwell today.
Oh, will hopefully everyone please keep Prabhu in your prayers then, that he feels better soon. Okay, I was just saying because often I'll ask one or the other, so I won't ask him to read any shlokas out if he's not here. That's the only reason I was asking. So Mataji, would you be happy to say the Sanskrit, and then maybe we can have Rohan Prabhu say the English?
Sure. 10.9 Maschita madgata prana bodhayantah parasparam kathayantascha mam nityam tushyanti charamanti cha.
The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service. They derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me.
I was muted. Here we find Krishna. He's now continuing, right, his description, and he's talking about the nature now of those devotees that he's brought up in the previous text, right? He said those who worship me with bhakti, right? Bhajante mam, right? Those who are engaged in worship of me, those pure devotees, they dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. So this is the nature of Krishna's devotee, right? This is, in many ways, this is defining what does it mean to be a devotee? What does a devotee look like? And again, continuing maybe our more rasic comments, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he defines this text as referring to devotion on the spontaneous platform, on the rag marg, right? And he defines this in several ways. Let's go. So he sees off the, I'm sure many of us will know, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, right? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma, Nivedanam, right? The 9 forms of bhakti, right? Prahlad Maharaj very nicely says. Sometimes people think these are all referring to Vaidhi Bhakti, but actually they refer to both, or they all play their roles in Vaidhi and Raganuga Bhakti. So Shravanam, Kirtanam, and Smaranam, however, are central to Raganuga Bhakti and also to Ragatmik Bhakti, right? So the spontaneous devotional service is very, very much centered around these 3. All the other forms pop up, right? Forget about Raganuga. Srila Prabhupada was a Ragatmik devotee, right? He was perfected in his Krishna Prem, right? He was a Prema Bhakta or a Bhava Bhakta. And yet Srila Prabhupada engaged in daily worship, right? Padasevanam. So it's not that we should think, or he engaged in parikrama rather, which is Padasevanam, right? So we shouldn't think that any of them are lower, but what defines spontaneous devotional service in general are these 3. And so we find these are present, right? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, right? These are all present in this text. And so this text is defining these natures. And so Chakravarti Thakur, he comments this. We can find the role there. I've put in brackets just because Sharanagati isn't necessarily part of Raganuga Bhakti, but Sharanagati is also very much present here. And Sharanagati is very, very essential, but I will come to that a little later on. I just flagged that for those of you who are taking notes, of why I've put that in brackets. So what we're finding here is a description of Raganuga Bhakti. And in many ways, we're finding the fulfillment of the whole Bhagavad-gītā in so many different ways. The first 6 chapters of the Gita, if somebody asks you what they're about, you'd say, oh, well, they're about the soul. They're about people, right? Because we hear about the different activities the soul can do, the different ways to realize the self, etc., right? But actually, I would say that the first 6 chapters say nothing about the soul. They say what the soul is not, right? It is not cuttable, it is not burnable, right? It is eternal, right? So it's non-perishing. So they tell us what the soul is not, but it doesn't actually tell us what the soul is. Here in the middle 6 chapters, we start to understand what the soul is. And how do we understand what the soul is? We can only understand what the soul is when we understand who Krishna is. That's why we are beginning to understand now what the soul is. The first 6 chapters were telling us how we can understand what the soul is not. It's not the body, it's not the mind, it's not this, it's not that. But now we are understanding what the soul is. And what is that? Krishna Nityadas, the eternal servant of Krishna. That is what the soul is. But we can't understand what that means until we understand the position of Krishna. And that's why people sometimes will think, oh, these middle 6 chapters, they're all about Krishna. Yes, in one sense, but they're also about completing the point of the whole Bhagavad-gītā, which is to understand the self, right? But we cannot understand the self if we do not understand Krishna. John Calvin, one of the famous Christian philosophers in the Middle Ages, he said that knowledge of self and knowledge of God are 2 sides of the 2 sides of a coin, right? They're inseparable. In order to understand the coin, we must understand the self in order to understand God, and we must understand God in order to understand the self. Up until that point, we're just discussing what the soul is not, right? And therefore, again, just to go back to this text we are hearing, right? This is the activity of the soul. Truly realize this is the activity of the soul, to relish in Krishna. And therefore we read, Tushyanti cha, Ramanti cha, right? Tushyanti means what? To be satisfied. Ramanti means what? To be blissful. So it doesn't Tushyanti, right? This is not the nature of the soul simply to be satisfied, right? Satisfaction is, I don't want to go to the gym today, but I'm happy I went, right? But bliss is, I'm, those sickos who enjoy the gym from the beginning to the end, right? They're enjoying all of it, right? That's what bliss is, right? Tushyanti, satisfaction is, I want to eat healthy and I feel good about myself every day, right? I'm feeling good every day when I get up because I eat healthy. I'm feeling lightweight. I'm feeling energetic and everything. Ramanti is I'm eating rasgullas every day, right? Well, it's not too blissful towards the end of that, but at the beginning, it's very blissful at least. If you take both together, this is the nature of the jiva in bhakti, right? So both must be there. Satisfaction is there. I feel satisfied by devotion, but I also feel blissful, right? If you see devotees, because this is referring to devotees on the higher levels, right? If we see devotees at the higher level, they're not thinking, oh, I have Mangal Aarti tomorrow. Oh, Prabhu, you know, I really have to go to sleep now. Sorry. Oh, set my alarm, right? They're very happy. I remember Kadamba Kanana Maharaj, when he was visiting Sydney a few years ago, he stayed up and was singing kirtan until God knows when, like well past bedtime, right? And then next morning, even at his age, right? Mangal Aarti, right there. At one level, they say bhakti goes from being the medicine to being the food, right? We force ourselves to have the medicine with our meals every once in a while to get better. But once we're better, we only want to eat bhakti, right? Bhakti we take therapeutically now, but later on we'll take it for our entire sustenance, right? So this is the nature, tushanti cha ramanti cha, right? Our acharyas also have commented, tushanti refers to certain loving relations, like friendly ones, but ramanti cha, that is like a boy and a girl are invested in each other in romantic love, right? I think Prabhupada even says that in his purport. But all of the other acharyas have said it as well. Baladev Vidyabhushan, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And this is again referring to the rag aspect. Ramanti means there is rag, right? There is spontaneity. One of my friends, he's visiting his family right now. And so, you know, I ring him every once in a while just to stay in touch, right? He's not a devotee, right? And so he's met some girl, right, while he's over there visiting. And so I'll ring him and I'll tell him, oh, you know, how's your family? How's this? And he says, oh, you know, this girl, she does this, this girl, she does that. I'm like, okay, that's very nice. How are your siblings? And then he said, you know, and then he'll tell me one detail. Oh, they're good. But you know, actually, this girl, she does this, she does that, right? He's not even changing the topic, right? I'm asking about everything else, and yet all he's doing is he's telling me about this girl he's met, right? So this is the this is if we will, this is the nature, right? This is the spontaneity that we should be expecting. Of course, that is a material example, right? And we're speaking about a spiritual affection, but our acharyas have pointed out this analysis. And therefore we see bodhayantaha and we see kathayantaha, right? Both of these are there, right? Both of these are present, right? Actually, you could switch these around. I just put them this way around because I wanted to. You could really switch them around. They're referring to a very similar thing, but there's slightly different moods to it. Kathayantaha is what we think of when we think of we are sharing Krishna's pastimes. Bodhayantaha is when we are using the intellect. Bodh, right? Buddhi, Buddha, you know, Bodhi, right? These are intellectual things, right? And so this is when we are discussing Krishna in a philosophical way, right? This is when we are studying Bhakti-śāstrī. This is when we are speaking Bhakti-śāstrī, right? Buddhayantaha. We should not think, oh, you know, we are on this high level, right? Where we are never discussing the science of Krishna. We are never intellectually engaging with Krishna. I'm so elevated. I don't want to do this, because Krishna, he's saying here, the great devotees, they are engaged in this as well, right? They're discussing the science of Krishna. Buddhayantaha, they are engaging their intellect, but they also very much are engaging kathayantaha. It's just as imbalanced. You know, you'll sometimes see people. What do they do? What do they engage in? What are they doing? All they'll do is they'll talk about science and this, and you know, they'll talk about philosophical arguments for the existence of God, whatever. Until and unless you're discussing Damodar Leela as well as the existence of God, both are shallow, right? Both need to be there, right? And so we see both, bodhayantaha and kathayantaha. And what is happening? Parasparam, right? That all of this is being done among the devotees. The devotees are sharing with each other. This is the nature, right? Devotion is not a solitary thing. You're not doing it on your own, right? And so you want to hear all of these things with excitement. Okay, and then moving on, then we have Sharanagati. Sharanagati is so essential. In many ways, we can say Krishna consciousness is just the process of us growing deeper and deeper into our Sharanagati. Or just quickly, everyone knows the definition of these words, right? Shravanam is hearing, Kirtanam is speaking. So what you are hearing, you're either hearing katha, you're hearing the holy names being chanted like that. Kirtanam is then speaking it, right? So Kirtanam refers to Bhagavatam class, it refers to Kirtans, etc., etc. And Smaranam is meditation. Again, when we do Nectar of Devotion, we'll go much deeper into these. I'm very excited to do Nectar of Devotion. And then Sharanagati means, what does Sharanagati mean? Surrender, right? So Krishna consciousness is entirely a process of us going deeper and deeper into our surrender to Krishna, right? This is all that it is. In the next moment, you can become fully Krishna conscious if you fully surrender to Krishna and the spiritual master, through the spiritual master, rather, we could say. right? If you do that in the next moment, 100% surrender, you're perfect, right? You can, call me out for being a rascal and teach the class instead, right? This is what could happen, but for most of us, right, we are not fully surrendered. I know I definitely have this, right? We'll talk about the symptoms of surrender next, and whenever I go through the list, I always feel bad because I don't do any of them. So Sharanagati is essential, but that's what it is, Madgata Prana, right? They rely on me, right? For all of their sustenance, all of their existence, right? Lives are fully devoted to me. This requires surrender. Until and unless we have surrender, we cannot make our lives fully about Krishna, because there will always be thoughts about something else. Baladev Vidyabhushan says this is like a fish relies on water. The devotees rely on Krishna. So therefore we have, I'll say the Sanskrit just because it's not on the Chatur Shloki. I'll stop being cruel. And then maybe Bhumi-gītā Mataji can say the English. Anukul yasya sankalpaha pratikul yasya varjanam rakshishyati iti vishvaso goptritve varanam tata atmanikshepa karpanye shadvidha sharanagatihi.
The 6 divisions of surrender are the acceptance of those things favorable to devotional service, the rejection of unfavorable things, the conviction that Krishna will give protection, the acceptance of the Lord as one's guardian or master, full self-surrender and humility.
So this is what thank you, Madhavi. So this is what Sharanagati means. We should, this is a great text to memorize. I know I say that pretty much anytime we discuss a shloka, but especially this one. This one is very practical on our level. We should be thinking, am I cultivating these specific moods? If I want to reach the point of the devotees discussed in the Chatur Shloki, am I doing these 6 things? This is a wonderful checklist, right? I try to, at least every day, think about which ones I'm doing, and then get very frustrated when I realize I'm doing none of them, right? So you can even baby steps it, but at least these 6, this is one of the real benefits of Krishna consciousness and our philosophy, is that we're very fortunate that it's very systematically laid out. So these 6 aspects should really be dwelt upon to see, are we aspiring towards Madgata Prana, right? And why are we trying to aspire towards this? Well, we'll discuss this in the next 2 texts, because it relates to that question I made you all do that activity on last week. But I might give you all a quick break, even though I'm racing against the clock now, but still, I want you all to be able to take it all in. So I'll see you all at, should we do 11:14? 11:14, I'll see you all. Okay, Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
If you want for your notes, also that's why I try to, whenever I cite a text, I try to give a reference, not necessarily where the text is from, but where you can find it in Prabhupada's books. Don't get me wrong, like, please use the slide to take the notes as much as you want. I'm just saying, if you're ever feeling like, you're scribbling down in a rush, whenever I cite a text, if I can find it in Prabhupada's books, I try and on the top of the slide. So this isn't actually, like, it is from Chaitanya. It's quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita. The original text is from some Vaishnav Tantra quoted in Hari Bhakti Vilas, but I just try and give an easy one, just as a little side note with my slides, just so it's easier for your note taking. Again, 100% more than happy for you to copy off the slide. I'm just saying, just for your own shorthand expediency. But yeah, Chaitanya Charitamrita is the most fun you'll ever have in your life, is reading Chaitanya Charitamrita. That either sounds like glorification or sounds like I have a very boring life, or one of the 2. Okay, Mataji, did you get the 6 points down?
Yes, Prabhu, thank you so much.
Jai, no problem. Okay, so now that we're back, I'll be cruel again. Who am I going to elect to say the Sanskrit? Sevamrita Mataji, would you like to say the Sanskrit? And Shivam Prabhu, would you like to say the English? Let's see if they're back. Okay, if I don't, then let's see who else is here. I'm trying to.
Wait, no,
Okay.
Purja, I'm
Okay.
here.
Okay. Shivam Prabhu's at least. Okay, Shivam, you can say the Sanskrit.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then let's see, who am I going to? Oh, actually, Vidhi Mataji. You can say the English.
Tesham satayuktanam pajatam pritipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamapayanti te.
To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Jai. So you might notice I've highlighted, and thank you, both of you. I've highlighted a certain word. Which word have I bolded out in the Sanskrit?
Buddhi yoga?
Yes, Buddhi Yoga. And I just highlighted it just to bring back that point. You might remember in the first 6 chapters, we were all having a bit of a pickle. What does Buddhi Yoga mean? Why is Prabhupada translating Buddhi Yoga, you know, the yoga of the intelligence, whatever? Why is he translating it as bhakti? Why is he translating it as devotional service, right? And of course, it's not that it has to be translated as devotional service, but it's also not that Krishna himself doesn't define it that way either, right? Because what's he saying? Bhajatam priti purvakam. That is nothing less than bhakti. That is worship filled with priti, right? Priti is the word that Jiva Goswami uses in his Priti Sandarbha, which is a book entirely about these loving exchanges, right? So bhajatam priti purvakam is definitionally bhakti. And yet, what is Krishna saying? Buddhi yogam tam, right? So here we find this equivalence between Buddhi Yoga and Bhakti is not some preaching strategy that Srila Prabhupada came up with. If we remember this, we'll see Srila Prabhupada's translations are very, very, they're very accurate and they're very profound reflection of the message of the text. We shouldn't, we shouldn't think any less, not that we do, but if anyone tries to propound any rascaldom, you can see right here, it's mentioned in the text, right? So to those who are constantly devoted to me, to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. And then we'll do the next text. And then I think these two work really well together. So we'll discuss a few points of philosophy. I have 1 or 2 pastimes left, and then hopefully I won't be really late to what I have later on today, because I do want to touch all the major points, at least for these texts. Okay, maybe we can have Taran Prabhu, would you like to say the Sanskrit, and Shavina Mataji, would you like to say the English? Have I already asked you to?
No.
Okay, yeah.
Tesham evanukam partham aham ajanana jam tamaha nasayami atma bhavastho jnana dipena bhasvata.
Jai.
To show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance.
Jai. So we've heard together these 2 texts, and as I've said, I think they work really well, right? They're describing the means. Again, what have we been discussing? The unknowable Krishna. We might have forgotten that as Krishna began to describe himself, right? But the unknowable Krishna, now he's describing that he's fully knowable to those who are engaging in bhakti. That is the basic thrust of what he's saying. But it is important to note that he is saying he is fully knowable to those who are engaging in bhakti, which comes to that question that I asked for the activity. Why take any external guidance? You all gave very wonderful answers last week, right? But at the real heart of it, it's that what's being described is somebody who's already doing devotion, right? We need external guidance to begin to do devotion on a very logical level. This whole idea, right, which someone might say, oh, Krishna, he will just guide me in the heart, or like this. How will he guide you in the heart if you have no love in your heart? If you have no bhakti in your heart, how is Krishna going to want to dwell in your heart, to illuminate your heart? He won't, right? That is a barren, empty heart for him. That has no appeal to him. So how is he going to illuminate it? What is he saying? He's saying to show them special mercy, right?
I dwelling in their hearts destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance, right? To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, right? Is the average mental speculator on the street constantly devoted, devoted to serving Krishna with love, right? Rascaldom. Tripurari Maharaj, he has a story of the early days of ISKCON, and there was this one new bhakta, new brahmachari, and he read that one text about how always think of Krishna and never forget Krishna, right? This is the summary of all the regulative principles, right? And so what he did is he would play a flute, and he would run around playing the flute, and he'd have a photo of Krishna on it at the end, and then he would say, see, I'm never forgetting Krishna, right? And people would say, engage in service, or study the books, right? He just heard this in a class, right? So study the books, do something, and he would say, no, I'm just never forgetting Krishna, and therefore I will be, wherever I go, I'm never forgetting Krishna. And then Tripurari Maharaj says, well, hopefully wherever he is now, he's not forgetting Krishna, because no one saw him again after a year or so, right? If you speculate like this, this is what happens when we don't read the text thoroughly and carefully, right? It's referring to those who are already engaged in satata yuktanam, right? This is no small thing. This isn't some cheap trifle, right? By which one goes. So instead, our acharyas, when they comment on these texts, they make it clear. Well, there's two main interpretations, right? The first one is, I'll give, is how Prabhupada, I guess in one sense, actually, no, Prabhupada's interpretation is very similar to the other ones. I won't complicate it by distinguishing them. I'll merge them into one big one. Prabhupada, he sort of talks about how if one is sincere, then Krishna, he will naturally guide from within, right? Or if one is a little bit unintelligent, right? I think there was one scientific research that somebody did, and it found that Hare Krishnas on average have lower critical thinking skills than the average person. So I always think of that one when Prabhupada says those who are not so intelligent to get through the information, still by their sincerity, Krishna will illuminate this knowledge, right? By their sincerity. So if one is not able to fully grasp, especially you think, I mean, of course, Srila Prabhupada was fully able to grasp it, but by his own words, Prabhupada would say, forget about the English, even the Bengali of my spiritual master, I would sit down, I would struggle to understand it, but still I sat and I listened, right? And by this sincerity, Srila Prabhupada was able to so fully, deeply understand his spiritual master's words. Why? Because when there is that sincerity and endeavor, then Krishna will personally, even if one is unable to fully understand the teachings, even if one is fully unable to understand the philosophy, still, right? Still, Krishna will illuminate in the heart if one has a sincere aspiration towards bhakti, right? Therefore, we see, I was visiting one temple once, and there was one sannyasi who had passed away, right? And I saw these great sannyasi scholars, like when they were speaking, I was thinking like, maybe in a million lifetimes I'll know a quarter of what they know. Like they were all glorifying this devotee, right? And they were glorifying him for the depth of his understanding of the Krishna conscious philosophy, right? They were just glorifying. I remember they were going in like just obscure text flowing Sanskrit, right? Like whole sections of the Bhagavatam. They were just going like that. I was just so astounded by the scholarship of all these devotees, honoring this other devotee who'd passed away, gone back home, back to Godhead for sure. And when they were discussing him, at one point it came up that he was actually illiterate, like he couldn't read, right? And yet, which sort of came as a shock to me, because I was thinking, here they are, there are all these great scholars and they're glorifying how deep his realization is, right? But what they said is, they said he had such a great, deep understanding of our philosophy, because in the summer, in that temple, right, in the summer, it would get very hot and there wasn't any air conditioning. And what he would do is he would, on the top floors, he would pour out this cold water, and he would constantly be engaging in keeping all of the devotees cold. He would, every single moment, he would be fanning the devotees. He would be changing out the water whenever any water would be getting warm, like this constantly, day in, day out. He would be engaged in this constant service, right? And because of this, he had a deeper realization than any of those scholars. They would always go to him and they would ask him philosophical questions, and he would always clarify it, right? Because of the sincerity of his service, right? So like this, we see, It is not a question of intelligence. If intelligence is there, then okay, cool, good for you, right? But if intelligence is not there, then Krishna will provide the intelligence in order to understand it. One should not think I'm not intelligent enough to dwell in philosophy. One must still listen to Harikatha of the past times and also of the philosophy. And if one feels they have not grasped it, then eventually Krishna, he will reveal those things, right? This is what is to be understood. Okay. So this is one way of understanding it. And this is how Prabhupada seems to indicate, right? And so we can understand this way. Again, none of this bogus, I'll just chant Hare Krishna and then I'll learn everything, right? Nonsense. Another way to understand it is we've just stressed the unknowability of Krishna. Who can know Krishna, right? Who can know him, right? Who can know anything about Krishna? Who knows, right? So this is what Krishna has been stressing, but now Krishna, he's so simply saying, by this way you can know me. So there might be a natural question that comes up. How can we say simply by the words of the spiritual master? The spiritual master, he can say so many things, but how can he grasp such complex topics, right? Not as a fault of the spiritual master, but as the fault of words. Words themselves are faulty. Not even that the spiritual master can't find the right words, but inherently, how can words capture such high knowledge? And so in that context as well, our acharyas, they've said, Krishna, he is saying that the words of the spiritual master, they are not empty. They are not given on their own. They are not given without any potency. Krishna himself, he will illuminate them. Krishna himself, he will provide the extra knowledge which comes with them, right? Krishna himself, he will give the words the potency to deliver that transcendental knowledge. So in all these ways, we can understand that actually these texts are saying the opposite. Someone might quickly read them very uncarefully, and they might think, oh, well, that just means I just need to keep on doing what I'm doing, just need to keep on going, and eventually Krishna will reveal these things in my heart. But actually, these texts are saying the opposite. These texts are saying by sincere engagement in hearing and service to the Guru, to the sadhus, to the Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, then we will understand these things. Then Krishna will do this. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, so I've got, but continuing again, our theme of some more esoteric readings. Again, I promise not to do too many esoteric pastimes and readings. But as I've said, at some points, I think it's good to see how deep these texts can go, because these texts are very, very incredibly deep. So these last two readings, I was reading, it was recorded that Srila Prabhupada, when he was a Grihastha, he hosted one of his godbrothers at his house, right? This godbrother would give sannyas to Srila Prabhupada's sannyas guru. And this is a common memory, actually. Mula Prakriti Mataji, she has compiled this beautiful book, Our Srila Prabhupada, a Friend to All. And it's a set of Prabhupada memories from people who knew Srila Prabhupada before he came to America. Right. So these are all the people who knew him when he was a Grihastha, when he was a Vanaprastha, when he was a young sannyasi, right? And they have all these memories of him. It's a really, really beautiful book she compiled. And in it, you'll hear often sannyasis and brahmacharis will say, oh yes, Swami Prabhupada, when he was a Grihastha, he would host us in his house, right? He would very nicely host us and he would take care of us and like this. And so this was a common thing. And so this godbrother, Srila Prabhupada writes in one letter, he says, him and I, we would discuss philosophy for a very long time whenever he would visit me. He is very philosophically knowledgeable. And I consider him even to be my Shiksha Guru. That's what Srila Prabhupada said. So they were discussing these two texts. And he gave his reading of it, and Srila Prabhupada, he said, in response, Prabhupada said, because he was asking Srila Prabhupada, they were discussing like godbrothers, right? And he was saying, do you think this is a valid reason? And Srila Prabhupada, he said, it must be so, right? It must be so. This is a very valid reading of the text. So all that to say, this is coming through the approval of Srila Prabhupada. So we have here text 10, Tesham Satata Yukta. So we have here a question we might have. If somebody is engaged constantly, right, in serving Krishna with love, we might be confused. Why is Krishna then saying, I give the understanding by which they can come to me, right? This might be a little bit confusing. Of course, there's two ways to understand it. There is the more explicit way, which is to say those constantly engaged constantly devoted to serving Krishna with love, but they're not fully at the highest level yet. Krishna, he's therefore giving further and higher understandings, right? This is why, that's a side note. I'll touch upon it next week. But another way that can be understood is that Krishna, again, as we were discussing, on the Rag Marg, right? On the higher levels, rules and regulations, right? They no longer apply, right? They no longer apply, and often they're transgressed. But because they are sometimes transgressed, because sometimes the rules are broken, right? In the service of the highest ideal of love. Again, this is for elevated devotees, and we'll discuss more about exactly why and exactly how when we get to Nectar of Devotion. But for those devotees who are on the level of Rag, right? They break these rules. They're able to break them. They're able to push past them. But often that causes issues, right? That causes problems, because how can they do that? How can they do that in a way that doesn't cause people to stop them, that doesn't cause them to be disrupted, right? In this way, for those who are constantly devoted to serving Krishna, he provides understanding by which they can come to him, by which they can express that love, by which they can do it. He gives them the understanding by which they can move around all the obstacles that are created around the world in order for them to express their spontaneous love. This is the means by which Krishna does it, to those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, right? So this is another understanding. This is a more esoteric one. For those who are having all these obstacles that are placed on the Rag Marg, right? For those who are experiencing all of those, Krishna gives the intelligence. Krishna gives the knowledge by which to overcome them, right? It's said that when Krishna would sneak out at night, right? In order to meet the gopis, Subal would do these hand signs to Krishna, right? In order to communicate, you should go here, you should go there. But he would also do those hand signs to communicate to all of Krishna's other associates. This is how you can sneak out here and sneak out there, right? In this way, Krishna, he is communicating that knowledge, right? He's communicating the understanding by which to meet him, right? So it's Krishna saying that when there are obstacles there, I give the understanding by which you can overcome those obstacles in order to attain me, right? So this is another reading that is present, right? Now, with text 11, we then hear a further thing. To show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance, right? This also can be a little bit confusing if we take a certain reading. If we take the initial reading that I explained, it makes a lot of sense, right? For that person who's not yet fully perfected Krishna, he will reveal his form in their heart, right? This is what we hear in the heart of the devotee, right? Krishna, he manifests, right? But then one might say also, but to those who are constantly engaged in Krishna service, right? Isn't Krishna already in their heart? And what ignorance can we say is in their heart? And so we also have this other more esoteric reading. And I've put a photo here so that it's not as visually bland for all of you. How do we understand this? How do we understand that Krishna, he is providing a lamp, right? He's destroying darkness of ignorance to those who are constantly engaged in a service, right? And to understand that, we have to understand the nature, again, of that separation. Separation is essential, right? Separation is essential to understanding love for Krishna, right? As we've already mentioned before, the love in separation is stronger than the love in union, right? Sachi Mata, when she was mourning, when Mahaprabhu took sannyas and he ran away from home, right? She would be mourning him, and so strongly she was engaged in pains of separation that at one point Mahaprabhu appeared right before her, right? It's described, Mahaprabhu, he told Sachi Mata that wherever there is the murti form of me, right? And wherever my name is chanted, there I am present. And whichever tongue is chanting your name, and whichever materials are used to make my murti, that is your incarnation as well. So I incarnate wherever my name is chanted, and wherever the murti is, and whatever material is made to make the murti, and whatever name chants the name, there you, Sachi Mata, you are present, right? So we see here there's the strong nature of their relationship, right? And because this is what happens, His Holiness Gaur Govinda Maharaj, he describes this. In separation, when one is away from someone, right? Their meditation on that person grows deeper. And this, I'm umming and eyeing this. I'm thinking, well, okay, no, I will have time. I'll tell you all one final Jagannath pastime. And then we'll conclude on that in order to illustrate this point. And then next week, we'll continue. Yep, and then, okay, yeah, we'll have time. I'll be a tiny bit late to what I have next. Okay, so this is a pastime that's told by His Holiness Gaur Govinda Maharaj. Gaur Govinda Maharaj, I forgot the book he cites. I think it's Mahabhav Prakash, but I'm going off memory here, right? So Gaur Govinda Maharaj, he describes a pastime, and in this pastime, it describes the Krishna, of course. He left Vraj for Mathura, right? He went to Dwarka, right? And going to Dwarka, as we know, we've already described this, right? This is always the origin of Jagannath, right? So maybe we can consider this pastime happened in another kalpa, in another era, right? And this is how the Jagannath form was revealed at that point. Just as a side note, Jagannath is an eternal form. It's not the Jagannath is temporary. The material, anyways, we'll discuss the difference between material and temporary forms later on. But Jagannath is an eternal form. So the form is just being revealed. It's not being created or anything, right? So Krishna, he left and he's in Dwarka, right? And while he's in Dwarka, as we've described, all of the gopis and gopas, everyone in Vrindavan, even the cows and the calves, all of them are completely burning in absolute pains of separation, right? Even the cows, they would not go out to graze, right? The cows would stop eating. They would be so depressed. The calves, they wouldn't even drink milk, right? You can see how calves, they go to drink their mother's milk. Even the calves, they completely would reject any milk. They would just be completely so sad. They would think, if Krishna is not there to drink my mother's milk, then why should I drink any, right? Like this, there was so much lament in Vrindavan. It's described that the birds, they did not chirp, right? The flowers, they did not blossom. Nothing happened at all. Vrindavan was completely barren, right? Everyone was basically lying down in complete pain of separation, right? They had no affection for life. They had no inspiration to keep on going. And like this, we hear that the Vrajvasis, they were completely in pain. And so like this, they were completely distraught. It's sometimes described that there's a river, right? That the Jamuna River flows through Mathura, actually, if you follow it down, right? And it's described that at that point, the Jamuna was no longer filled, right, with regular water, but it was also filled with the tears of the devotees as a message, right, to remind Krishna of his beloved Vrajvasis, who he is no longer in the company of, right? Their tears would merge in with the Jamuna, and like that, they would flow down to Dwarka. And in Dwarka, Krishna, he would see these tears and he would become completely heartbroken as a reminder of those devotees that he had left. So like this, we hear. And of all the devotees, the one who was most hurt by this was Srimati Radhika, Srimati Radharani, right? Srimati Radharani is considered was completely on the verge of death. How could she exist without Krishna? Aham sarvasya prabhavo, we were discussing this, right? Sometimes people say, we will say, where did, oh, one second, sorry. Somebody came at the door. So we might wonder, right? Where did everything come from, right? Where did everything come from? And people will say, oh, well, you know, God is the origin of everything, right? And we'll say, okay, but where did God come from, right? And normally people, they get stumped by this. They'll say, oh, where did God come from, right? Who knows where God came from, right? They'll say it like this. But actually, we know, aham sarvasya prabhavo, right? Aham sarvasya prabhavo. Everything is coming from Krishna. Krishna is the originless origin. Krishna is the thing which everything comes from, but he doesn't come from anything else, right? Because Krishna never came from anything, right? He is the original source. So like this, we can understand, right? Krishna is the source of all reality, right? But even further, in our philosophy, we can say, what is the source of Krishna? Srimati Radharani is the source of Krishna. And who is the source of Srimati Radharani? Krishna is the source of Srimati Radharani. So we can resolve it in a loop, right? These two, they are causing each other. They are the origin of each other. So what happens when you separate the two? This is very, very difficult, right? And so Srimati Radharani, what happened? Srimati Radharani, she was on the verge of death, right? She was completely burning up in pain, right? She was completely on the verge of dying. And so she was experiencing these pains the strongest, right? Stronger than anyone else, right? And so like this, we see in her pain, she was suffering. So what would happen While all of this was happening, and Krishna was constantly being reminded by these tears, in Dwarka, Krishna himself, with all of these memories, he would become so upset. He would feel so much separation, right? And he would think of Radharani, Lalita, Vishaka, all of these, right? And so thinking like this, he would keep on passing out, right? And at one point, he passed out so strongly that no one could wake him up. Krishna, he had completely lost external consciousness, right? And losing external consciousness like this, right? No one knew what to do, right? Everyone was thinking, Krishna, he is our king, right? Dwarka cannot run without it. How can we solve this problem, right? How will Dwarka manage to run if our king is completely out of consciousness? And so Uddhav, he came, and Uddhav, he called for Balaram. And then Balaram, he said, okay, well, let's ask Narad Muni, right? And so Narad Muni, Uddhav, and Balaram, all of them together, they were discussing among themselves, how can we do this? How can we bring him back to consciousness, right? And so Narada Muni, he said, well, you know, Krishna, he's quite clearly showing all the signs of separation. What we should do is I should begin to play my veena, and I will start singing Bhagavad-gītā. But I will not sing any other part of Bhagavad-gītā, but the pastimes of Vrindavan. And so playing this veena, I will sing beautiful, beautiful bhajans. I will sing beautiful, beautiful recitations of the glories of the Brijvasis, of Mother Jashoda, of Srimati Radhika. Like this, I will sing all of this. And in this way, we will revive him. But does anyone know what is the problem of reviving Krishna? What happens if you revive Krishna in this way? The issue is, yes?
Is it like when he hears, then because he's in such a pain of separation, he took the form of Jagannath. So would there something similar would happen? Like you revive him, but he's in a pain of separation, and he'll again go into that deep.
So this is the, yes, you're almost there, right? Because he will be thinking this. He won't necessarily take the form of Jagannath, but he will be so deeply in that mood, right, that he'll instantly return to Vrindavan, and Dwarka will no longer have a king at all. This is our issue. This is our issue, right? If we remind Krishna of the glories of Vrindavan, then instantly he will run away, right? And running away, what issue, right? There'll be lots of issues, right? So he said, are you sure we should do this, right? So after thinking, they were thinking, what should we do? And they were discussing, oh, is it better for him to be passed out like this? And so at one point they thought, okay, 100%, we will definitely engage in this plan, right? We will definitely have Narad Muni sing this, but we have to have somebody go to Vrindavan to warn them that maybe Krishna is going back. And so they discussed this, right? They said that one of us should go. And so they said first, Uddhav, you should go. And Uddhav said, oh, I've already gone. And I told him he would come and he didn't come. They won't believe me if I go, so I can't go. And they thought, oh, this is a good point, right? In that point, they said, well, who else will they trust, right? Uddhav, they might trust because he looks so much like Krishna, but they won't trust him because he's already lied to them before. So we'll have to send Baladev, right? So Baladev, he said, but actually, I have so many times said similar things, right? And I went and I said, Krishna, right? I said, because when I went to Vrindavan, I told them all, I'll bring Krishna back next time. Don't you worry, right? And then they thought, oh, well, now they won't believe Balaram either, right? Balaram is also now a liar, right? So what will we do, right? So while they were discussing this, Subhadra, right? The sister of Krishna and Balaram, she came in and she said, I have not gone before. And seeing as I'm a sibling of Krishna, they will believe me, right? So I will go and I will convey this message, right? So everyone thought this is a very, very nice idea, right? So if I will go and I will go in my chariot, I will go in my rath and I will go there to Vraj, right? So in this way, Subhadra, she said she will go. So when Subhadra began ready to go, Balaram, he thought, wait a second. Subhadra, she is going to Vrindavan. When Krishna awakes, he will be going to Vrindavan. Why am I the loser? I'm the only one who's not going to Vrindavan. So I will go with Subhadra as well, right? So like this, Baladev thought, I will go along, right? I just won't say anything because they won't believe me if I say anything. So like this, they went, right? And Subhadra, she said, okay, Balaram, Baladev, you should go first. so you can protect me during the journey. You can go in the front and I will go behind you and I will follow you. Also, you are more familiar with the journey. So like this, Balaram, he went in front and Subhadra, she followed along in the back. So like this, they went along. And they began to do their journey, right? While they were journeying, Narada Muni, he began to sing the glories of the gopis. He began to sing the glories of the Vrajvasis, right? And he said, singing this, he was playing the veena, right? And the moment his voice, right, the voice of the devotee, and again, we should think, there's so many points to be made in this pastime, but I don't have time to discuss all of them, but we should think, I was stressing last week, what is the value of hearing from the great, great devotees, Harikatha? It's so valuable. We can't even begin to understand how valuable it is, right? And so Krishna himself, he also understands its value. And hearing the sweet music of the veena and hearing the words of Narada Muni coming out, he began to feel completely inspired, right? He regained consciousness and he was thinking, oh, wow, what a beautiful day in Vrindavan. He's thinking, I have awoken. He went down to reach for his flute, and reaching down, he said, oh, I must have lost my flute. Oh, the gopis must have stolen my flute. He began to think like this, right? And he's thinking all of these things, right? And like this, he began searching for his flute. And then he said, oh, Lalita has taken it? Or maybe Srimati Radharani has taken it. Who has stolen my flute? And like this, he began very, very confused. And as he was searching around, he was thinking, where is it gone, right? And at this point, for the first time in Dwarka, Krishna, he manifested his bending form, his three bhanga form, right? Because a three bhanga form is normally only manifested in Vrindavan. Why? Because in Dwarka, Krishna, he is very straight. He's very following all the rules, right? But Krishna in Vrindavan, he is crooked. He is very naughty, right? So the three bhanga form is only manifested in Vrindavan, right? So in this way, we find Krishna, he manifests his form, and everyone in Dwarka, they're overwhelmed. They're thinking, what a beautiful form of Krishna this is, right? So then he turns around and being confused, you know, when you're confused at one point, you want to see, where are you? And he sees Narad and he sees Uddhav and he says, oh, Naradji, what are you doing in Vrindavan? Oh, Uddhav, what are you doing in Vrindavan? This is very, very confusing. I'm very happy that you come to visit. I'll tell Mother Jashoda to prepare something so that you can be very nicely welcomed. And like this, they were very heartbroken to tell Krishna, you are not in Vrindavan, you're in Dwarka at this moment, you're in Mathura. And Krishna became very, very confused. And he thought, wait a second, why am I here? Why would I be doing anything, right? And so what happened was that Krishna, it's a long pastime. Actually, Krishna, he faints again. And I won't say it because I'm running late now. And soon this class will be running late as well if I keep going on. So eventually what happens is that Krishna, he's able to get into his chariot, right? And completely mad, he was in the chariot. And he sat down and his charioteer, Daruka, he was already told in advance, be ready to do the Vrindavan trip. So he shot along, right, to catch up with everyone else, right? So Baladev and Subhadra, they were ahead, but they were still following behind. But at this moment, right, now we can go back to Vrindavan. And in this moment in Vrindavan, Srimati Radharani, she's very much in pains of separation. And she's feeling like her life here is going to go away. All the gopis together, they're all discussing, they're all taking care of each other. Chandravali, right, the eternal enemy, if you will, of Srimati Radharani. At this point, because they all have the same problem, they've all become friends, right? So Chandravali, she is nursing Srimati Radharani. As Srimati Radharani is feeling completely this pain, she's thinking, surely I will give up my body soon. How can I live without Krishna, right? So we see like this Chandravali, right? Chandravali, she's speaking and she's consoling Srimati Radhika, right? And together they're speaking and they're giving each other some comfort, right? And Chandravali, she tells Radharani, if Krishna, he does not return from Dwarka at some point, then I will curse him. I will curse that heartless man. I will curse him for never returning, right? So like this, she was saying, you should stay in your body, Srimati Radharani, because if you stay in your body, then you can curse him with me for being so heartless, right? So don't leave your body. Together we will chastise that evil, evil Krishna who has left us, right? Like this they were discussing, right? And so at this point, right, Srimati Radharani, she was saying, how could I ever dream of doing that? I am angry at Krishna's face, but the moment Krishna has gone, my heart is completely melted and I can have no anger for him. I'm only expressing my anger to him in order to increase the pleasure we have in our exchange, right? And so like this, there was a discussion. And at that very moment, right, when she said that, Baladev and Subhadra's chariots, they appear, right? And they come in, right? And very, very close behind, right? driven by the intensity of Krishna's desire, is Krishna's chariot as well. And so they're all arriving, right? And at that moment, right, overhearing the conversation and hearing therefore that Srimati Radharani, that she is close to the verge of death, right? Krishna, he jumps out of his chariot and he runs towards her. And as he runs closer and closer and closer, what happens? He begins to become overwhelmed by this mood of separation. He is so close and yet he is so far. The closer he gets, the more intense the separation is, because the more and more he's reminded, I'm not yet with Srimati Radharani. And as he gets closer and closer, this feeling of separation becomes so intense that his arms begin to melt into his body. His eyes become wide, right? He gets a big, large smile, and we start seeing the Jagannath form manifesting again, right? Seeing this beautiful form, Subhadra and Baladev, they see this form and their bodies melt as well, seeing the beauty of this Jagannath form, right? And so seeing this form, right, Krishna, he is able to experience that. But what does this have to do with the shloka? What does this have to do with text 10:11, right? This is another way of understanding this text, right? 2, what is the darkness of ignorance? The darkness of ignorance is separation, right? And to show them special mercy, Krishna, he dwells in their hearts. He appears in the hearts of those devotees who are feeling separation from him. Because what does Krishna say then to Srimati Radharani? He says, why were you about to give up the ghost? As they say in Old English, why were you ready to pass away? Why were you doing all of these things, Srimati Radharani? And she said, in your separation, I could not survive. In your separation, how could I survive? And therefore, Krishna, he said, don't you know, when you're in separation, when you are seeing somebody, their presence enters into your senses, right? And so your meditation is there in your eyes, in your hand, in your smell, in your touch, all of these ways you meditate on someone. But when they are not there, they're not entering into the senses. And when you are feeling that separation, your meditation is not in the senses, but it is in the heart. It comes from the heart outwards. And so in separation, your meditation is deeper than your meditation if I was right there in front of you. You should know that these forms of Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra, they are like 3 logs of wood that are eternally floating in your heart. That's how Gaur Govinda Maharaj describes Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra. They are these 3 logs of wood. And why are they floating in the heart of Srimati Radharani? They are floating in our heart because she is constantly meditating on that form within the heart, not just shallow on the senses, but within the heart. And because of this, that meditation and separation is even deeper than the meditation in the presence of, right? And in this way, Krishna, he is saying, I'm present in your heart. I'm never not present to that devotee who is genuinely hankering after me in separation. And so in this way, we can also understand this text. To show them special mercy, I appear in their hearts to those who are feeling the pains of separation, which are the darkness born of ignorance. This is a more esoteric way of understanding this text as well. So we've found a few different ways to understand this text. Again, I am now very late. That's why my door got up and I got a shock because I lost track of time. I thought I'm going to be very late now, but what to do? Yeah, but that's another way of understanding this text, right? A bit more of an esoteric way. Again, I don't normally like to go into too many esoteric details, but for the most confidential knowledge, we should. These are the open book questions. I'll send the slide into the WhatsApp group. You have 3 weeks. I'll give you 3 weeks. 3 weeks, same format as before, like that. And yeah, I just thought I'd flag that before we end. But yeah, I normally take questions unless are there any burning questions? If there's no burning questions, I'll wrap up now. I'll get a 5-minute early mark for myself. Okay, well, on that note, we'll conclude. We've just managed to go through the Chatur Shloki, and next week we will conclude chapter 10 and begin chapter 11. Okay, Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Grantarat Srimad Bhagavad-gītā ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you.
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.